This is always my favorite part of every single day. It's going live. You know where we're at. We're back here on the Make Money and Have Fun show. I got to tell you, this show has seen so much growth since I first started it. I started it back in October. So what was that? Almost 6 months ago at this point. 5 months ago, 6 months ago, something like that. And as soon as I started it, I was like, you know what? This is the best decision I made in 2020. And in 2021, I decided, you know what? It's not enough. I got to do even more. I got to go bigger. I got to go better. I got to grow it. And I got to make it even more than what it already was. And I decided to do this thing called Author Month. So if you've been following along at all month long, I've been going live pretty much every single day with a brand new author. And today I'm super excited to introduce today's author. So let's get into it.
My motto in life is make money and have fun. I'm on a mission to show everyone how to make money, yeah, and have fun. I'm all about making money and having fun.
You know what that music means. That means it's time to go over here. Time for me to introduce you to my guest. So today I'm talking to Miss Brittany Bexton, who is just a super cool individual. I got to meet her a little bit through Facebook and through Facebook Messenger, but I want to hear even more about her writing, and about everything it is that she does. So please help me welcome Miss Brittany Bexton. What's going on, Brittany?
Hello, so glad to be here. We are currently totally snowed in Nashville area, so
Nice.
I guess most of the country, though, is dealing with the same thing right now.
Yeah, it's like last year we had killer hornets or whatever the heck it was, and this year it's just snow. So who the heck knows? I mean, I'm in Philadelphia, and my guest before you lives in Tampa, Florida, and I'm coming over to your house to sit in the sun under the palm trees. He's going around in shorts and a t-shirt everywhere, and I'm shoveling a foot of snow.
You must be South Florida, because one of my friends in Florida said it was 36 degrees this morning. So
I feel like for Florida, that's like, pandemic levels of cold. And
totally.
I'm in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, so I'm used to 20 degrees, 30 degrees, 12 degrees, like all that kind of stuff. I'm like, oh yeah, it must be winter. So Brittany, what's going on? Tell us about yourself.
So I am a singer-songwriter. I moved to Nashville. Actually, it will be 10 years ago this year in October, and I moved out here to pursue my music full time. I had had a career in musical theater before that and done film and TV work. And it's funny because I never thought I was going to be an author. It was not something I planned. It just kind of happened after a whole lot of crazy life experiences. But a few years ago, I stopped touring full time. I was still touring, but I wasn't on the road constantly. I took a step back to focus on writing and kind of put down some roots because I'd been on the road so much after I moved here. And during that time, God really pressed it into my heart that I was supposed to write a book. And while I was kind of on a hiatus from recording my new album, I decided it was time to write that. And it came out last year, right before the world shut down. It came out February 4th. I don't know how well you can see that. Learning to Believe Again is my book. So I'm glad to share about that with you. Yeah.
Cool. So walk us through this. So you started out as a musician or a singer, or what was it?
Well, I started out as a singer. I mean, if we're really going all the way back, I've been singing since before I was potty trained.
Wow.
I just always loved music. I think that everyone, for the most part, that's in music, it's really part of you since you're really, really young. It's kind of just part of your soul, right? Mm-hmm. So I started singing when I was really young. I sang in church choirs all over the place. I went to youth groups and sang in church choirs. I started doing musical theater productions and taking voice lessons when I was in middle school, but I also played instruments when I was younger. So elementary school, I started playing violin, clarinet, of course, no instruments that you can sing with, which is kind of funny. That's why I don't play those so much anymore, but
Makes sense.
added piano along the way. I mostly play to write. I prefer to have a fabulous instrumentalist play with me when I sing live places so that I can just perform and sing.
Got it. Got it. So what is it about singing that drew you in so much?
I don't think I ever really thought about it. It was just part of how I expressed myself. I think I probably sing and hum more than I talk, which really is something because I can talk a lot if you get me going.
I love that. I love that. It's interesting that you brought up the fact that you felt like it started since before you were potty trained. I feel like we all have that thing. Maybe it's not necessarily singing. I mean, singing is something that you can kind of manifest early on. My parents always told me that I never stopped talking as a baby. And now here I am running my own talk show. What the hell's wrong with me? Right. But I always look at that as like that weird phenomenon where like I feel like I was a natural born speaker. And I even hate using that cliche because I'm like, no, I definitely had to train myself. I definitely had to put work in. I definitely, that kind of stuff. But it always just came somewhat naturally to me. And to see you in that same kind of space with singing just makes me, resonate with that entirely.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we all have our natural giftings. It doesn't mean we don't have to cultivate them though, right? Because I have definitely spent a lot of time cultivating my singing. I've spent a lot of time in voice lessons. I had 4 master teachers, sang in all the choirs, have done a lot of training. But it was just not only my natural gifting, but kind of a natural inclination, right? We're all drawn to certain things. Our soul just resonates with them.
Totally, totally. Do you feel, I guess here's something interesting that I kind of looked at. When I was in high school, I started doing musical theater and stuff like that. I've kind of always had a little bit of a music background because my dad is a professional musician. He's played guitar his whole life. He was part of a band, teaches music, all that kind of stuff. So I always had like the oral recognition. I just never really put in the time that I should have. I play a real little bit of guitar. I got my cowboy chords down. That's about it. And I like to pretend that I'm good on the guitar, and then my girlfriend reminds me that I'm not. So anyway, I found it fascinating when I started getting into musical theater that a lot of shows are very, I guess for lack of a better word, very heavy and full blown stories, given through the context of song, which is a different context than just speaking a story. There's an emotional barrier that's created because of that and things like that. So do you feel that singing helps you better express yourself, better tell a story, and that kind of stuff? So I'm trying to figure out how to ask it, but I think you get the idea.
I do. And yeah, I absolutely do. I did professional theater for years too, and I did all the musicals in high school. So I'm with you on that. But you know what they used to always say, because people like to make fun of musicals because they want to say, why would someone just burst out into song, right? But what I was always told, there's a saying that goes, when an emotion is too strong for words, that's when you sing. And for me, that's been true in life. Sometimes things can't really fully be expressed in words because music just speaks a lot louder. It breaks a barrier, kind of as you were saying, and it pushes through to a different place and a different level, and it allows expression in a different way.
I totally agree. I'm actually writing that quote out now because it's so good to write down. If it's too emotional.
Yeah, if the emotion is too strong to speak it, that's when we sing. That's when the song breaks out. And I'm probably not getting it word for word, but that's the gist.
I like it that way, honestly. I think that's better. That's when we sing it. When it's too strong. All right, bam, there it is. If the emotion is too strong to speak, that's when we sing it. I love that. I love that so much. It's interesting. Like you said, a lot of people, I think that the uninitiated, if you will, the people who aren't familiar with musical theater always have that gripe. They're like, why the heck are these people singing all the time? And I think that when you look at it through a storytelling context, I'm a big fan of storytelling. I've written 3 books at this point. I got my first one, my second one. I don't even remember what order I wrote them in. It was this one first, I think. Then it was this one. And then I got my third one on the way that'll be out very soon. So I always look at the different mediums through which to tell a story. And I've never actually explored, other than this interview with you, using song to tell a story through. I had on the first of this month, my first guest was Lane Eady, who you might know. He wrote a children's book, and he uses his main character as a cat, right? Similar to like Cat in the Hat kind of an idea. Awesome. And that was an interesting conversation with him, because it's a different type of storytelling as well. Do you feel so let's kind of jump into the book portion of this, because that's what a lot of the people are here to talk about. How was that transition for you, going from telling a story through singing to telling a story through the written word? What was that like for you?
It's interesting. It wasn't a hard transition for me, but I've always been a wordsmith of sorts. When I was younger, I wrote poetry and songs, and I was in all the honors English classes and things. So I've always loved the written word, whether it's music, whether it's plays, telling a story, whether it's poetry. So I feel like my book in some ways is a little bit of a cross between poetry and telling my own story and telling a piece of God's story and sharing some of his words. And the way I wrote it was kind of a free-flowing conversation with things that were images, that were thoughts, that were revelations that the Lord had given me through my own process of healing, through my own life and situations, things that were breakthrough moments for me that I was able to kind of express in that way. So yeah, it's funny because my book is technically a devotional, but it's not really like a typical devotional where you have a short paragraph and that's it. It's really more of a conversation into a story about healing, about experience, and inviting people into their own story a bit.
So cool. That's actually a really interesting way to put it. I claim to have written a few poems in my life. I don't know if they were actually poems or if they were just like rhythmic writing, which I feel like is poetry. Regardless, the idea is that I think that it's interesting that they use that to kind of bridge the context, in a sense, between singing and just writing out the words that way. But I always love connecting with the reader through my words in that context. So let's talk to the reader for a second, because I feel like there's a lot of readers out there who are in this space of, I want to write a book, but I don't know how. I don't know what to do to get started. What kind of advice would you give to that person who's in that space?
Honestly, the best advice that I can give is just start. I never planned to write a book. I didn't know where to start. I just sort of let it lead. But I did make a choice to get started. Just start. I mean, I had no idea what I needed to do to write a book. I had no idea what the process needed to be. I just knew I had something to say. And I sat down every morning at the same time. I would go to Starbucks. I'd get my coffee where I could focus. I know some people can't focus at coffee shops, but that's my thing. And I would sit and I would write for at least an hour, maybe two, and just do it. And then I wouldn't edit too much at the time. I would go back later and read through it, and then maybe have a friend read through it and make sure that what I'd written made sense, that it free flowed, and that it was edited to, a degree that made sense grammatically as well.
That's actually really cool, because it's interesting, because I've had many different authors on here, and even my own story of writing. My first book, for instance, I wrote this similar to the way you wrote yours. Now, I don't like coffee. I actually think it's gross, to be completely honest with you. And people ask me all the time, they're like, how many cups of coffee do you have in a day? And I'm like, 0. I drink water. That's it. That's literally all I drink. Ask my girlfriend. She'll tell you. And but yeah, my first book, I wrote every single word myself. Right? This was all handwritten by me. And I always tell the funny story that the day I finished it and I pushed publish to publish it myself, I vowed to myself I'm never writing another book again. And the next morning I woke up and the only thing I wanted to do was write. It was the craziest thing. And then my third book now, I wrote it again, I wrote a third book again, obviously, but I used a ghostwriter this time to write it. So it's always interesting to see people's kind of different stories, with that, and how they kind of traverse that obstacle of writing it in the first place. So
Yeah.
for you, it's going to the coffee shop. For other people, it might be the home office. It might be out somewhere. It might be wherever. And even some people have even talked about dictating the book as well. So there's so many different ways out there to do it. I just think that's so cool. So let's go to the next step now. So we've got it written. We went to the coffee shop. We did our thing. What's your drink, by the way? What's your coffee?
Oh my goodness. I actually don't drink coffee every time. I do
Hmm.
like coffee a lot, but I do not do caffeine. My body hates caffeine. I'm like this person on caffeine unless I'm really tired.
I mean,
But
you got a lot of energy already, so I feel like the caffeine isn't needed.
I like want to crawl out of my skin if I have too much caffeine because I'm like this.
I think
But I do love coffee. I like actually because I was there every day and nobody needs to spend that much on coffee. I would just get like a decaf Americano and I would get it in a tall cup and I'd put like that much cream in it.
okay.
Oh, sorry, I would get
Well,
it tall in a large cup is what I meant.
ah,
Or I would do like an iced tea or a hot chocolate or just a hot tea. And it's just for me, I kind of have an ADD brain that needs a lot of stimulation.
yep.
Otherwise, it's hard to focus. Now, once I get into focus mode, I'm hyper focused and you can't really stop me until I'm finished. I hate shifting gears in that way.
Hmm.
But otherwise, I'm in 10 different directions. And at home, there are just too many things for me to get involved in. Or I'm like, oh, if I just turn on the TV in the background, that'll be fine. And then I'm like not fully focused. But at a
Exactly.
coffee shop, I can sit. There's enough going on around me that my mind is like, oh, good, there's activity. But it's nothing that's going to draw me in so I can actually
Hmm.
focus on what I'm doing. But I
Yeah.
know that everybody focuses differently. But that's kind of my game with the coffee shop.
No, I get it. That's interesting. I kind of want to go down that path a little bit. So I learned a couple years back a phrase that's always going to stick with me, and that's your environment is always stronger than your willpower. And basically, what that means is that a lot of people have trouble focusing for extended periods of time because there's so much friction between them and the thing that they need. If you have a stack of papers on your desk, it's going to be a lot harder for you to turn your computer on and get to work, and than it is if everything is conducive and lined up. And so it's interesting that you kind of found a way to harness your superpower, because I look at ADD or ADHD as a superpower. Almost every one of my friends has it. I think it's synonymous with entrepreneurship and artists like yourself.
Yeah.
I just think that we are that breed that's like, okay, our brain is not functioning in this routine, rhythmic, consistent way. It's functioning in a very spontaneous and outburst kind of a way. But when we figure out how to control that, that's what makes us unique. That's what makes us powerful, and that's what really gives us our own level of success in that level. For me personally, I would hate being in a coffee shop. I'd get more distracted writing from a coffee shop than anywhere else because there's too much noise. There's too many other people. I'm very observant. Like I'm very much a people watcher and that kind of thing. So I just be like watching some guy and I'm like, man, he has a stain on his tie. I wonder if he knows that there's that stain on his tie. And I'm like, wait a minute, I just wasted 2 hours talking about this guy's tie and I should have been writing. So for me, I got to turn everything off. I got to my girlfriend can't come over. I'm like, stay home, go away, leave me alone. I'm working.
Yeah.
So it's all different, but I love that you've identified what works for you because that's what makes you work at that point. So let's jump to the next level here. So you wrote the book, now publishing. I feel like this is almost where a lot of people hang themselves up at because they're like, oh, I can write a book all day long, but what the heck do I do once it's written? So how would you answer that question for somebody who's an aspiring writer?
So this, I really had no idea about it all when I started because like I said, I never set out to write a book. Now, when I finished, first thing I did was kind of process what a name for the book should be. And I realized that my single coming out was the perfect name for the book because my single was called Believe Again and the hook line is learning to believe again. And I'm like, well, that's what the book's about. So I'm like, okay, once I figured that out, it gave me some new ideas. And because of the way I operate, I kind of thought about marketing ideas first. Like, who is this book going to reach? Why does it matter? Why would it matter to a publisher? So I had that in mind before I ever really looked at talking to anybody. But I'd never talked to a publisher ever. I had
Right.
no idea where to start. I luckily did have one friend who is actually a very famous author, Jay Asher, who wrote the book 13 Reasons Why, which some people will probably know now from the Netflix series that was based off of it. But I asked him what I should do. Now, he's not a Christian author or a faith-based author. He's a fiction writer and for YA, so it's very different. But I figured he could at least give me some guidance, right? And he said, well, I'm not sure because I've not done that type of writing, but I would assume that what you'd need to do is probably find a book agent first and then have them pitch you to publishers. So I was like, okay, I'll do that. And another friend who is an editor said, don't get it edited first. Like, do your edits, but don't get it edited because the publisher will probably do a ton of edits and it would be a waste of money. So I was like, okay. So that was kind of the base I started from.
Right.
And I did look for book agents, but because I was not an author that had been out there for a while, I looked around and I really read people's bios initially. And I thought, okay, who might be more accepting of me as a brand new author? And I knew that the format of my book was a little bit different, but I had written it the way I had for a reason. So I actually found a potential book agent and reached out to her, who had become a new writer herself and was relatively new to the business, but had had a successful time. And I thought, well, since she's new and she's a newer writer herself, she would probably be more open to me. And I approached her and I talked to her about the idea, and she was actually open to hearing about the book. And funny enough, we had a personal connection that I never would have known about, a friend of mine from a long time ago. But she ended up not representing me, but it was an important stepping stone, because working back and forth with her, even though she ended up not representing me, did take my book to the next level, because she encouraged me to add pieces, bigger pieces of my own personal story to some of the chapters that she had seen. And she only saw a few of them. But ultimately, we weren't a great fit because the format of the book, as I wanted it, was not really what she was envisioning. And I knew I wanted it this way for a reason. So when that didn't pan out, I kind of went, okay, what next? And I had a really good friend that really encouraged me through all of it and kept me motivated to keep pursuing it. Because, you know, a lot of the time I feel like, for me, and I think for anyone, when we're pursuing something new, we often get stuck at our own confidence level of like, what next? What if there's rejection involved? How do I reach out to this? And there are nerves around that, right?
Absolutely.
But I think when you have really good people in your court, it really helps with that, because, you know, like, I have this solid base to fall on. I know who I am, and it doesn't really matter what they say. I will still keep pursuing that, and I still know that what I've done is worthwhile. So that was important for me, especially because my journey and story involves some trauma-related stuff. So it was important to me to have that and that encouragement, and also just kind of that solid foundation to go from. But
I love that. That's amazing. Keep going.
Okay, sorry. I'm like, I know you might want to ask more questions, so if you do, just pop on
This
and interject.
this is a great story. I love it. Keep going.
But funny enough, the person who connected me to the person who connected me to Morgan James Publishing was not in books at all. It was a friend of mine in real estate, because I do real estate also. And it was one of my mentors in real estate, and she loved what I had done. And she was just so proud of me for doing the book that I had done, that she was like, you know what? I have a friend that is a publisher, and he really likes this kind of stuff. And I think that he would like your concept. I'll introduce you to him when you're ready. And I was like, okay. So when the book agent thing didn't work, I reached out to her, and she just gave me his name on Facebook and like sent me the link for his Facebook. And I reached out to him myself, and I was like, hey, Renee told me that you were a publisher and she thought that you might like my book. So I'm reaching out to you. And he and I had a conversation, and we went back and forth. And now that wasn't even Morgan James, but he really liked the idea of my book. my book is centered around some abuse related topics. Not that it's for people only that have been through abuse. It's really geared towards folks that have been through loss, abuse, trauma. But my own story includes some abuse that I healed from. So I wanted it to be something that was a usable guide for people who'd either gotten out of abuse, were in it needing to get out, or for family and friends, so that people could get together and talk about these topics and have a Bible study in a healthy format with something that could be a guide. And he loved that because of things that his own wife had been through and books that he had put out. But funny enough, his company kind of dissolved at the time and went totally different directions, he and his partner. But he knew Morgan James, and he happened to know David Hancock, who of course runs Morgan James, and he made the introduction for me. And he sent an email to David saying that I had a great book that he thought they would love, and connected us. And man, the story just goes from there. So I had no idea what I was doing to start. I just started asking.
So amazing. There's so many lessons in that story. I don't know if you've ever read my favorite book of all time. It's a book called Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill.
I haven't, but I'll have to check it out.
Oh, man. You have literally hit almost every single principle that's taught in that book, in that one story. So the first chapter is about having a burning desire. It's this story about a guy who wants to go. It was written back in the 30s. And so this guy wants to go work with Thomas Edison. Like, he wants to be business partners with Thomas Edison. And he has no money, he has no connections to get there, and he finds a way to do it because all he had was a burning desire, which is basically where your story started out. I don't know what's making that noise, but something's being annoying. I don't know. Something wants to interrupt us, but it's not gonna happen here because we're too strong for it. But anyway, I don't know. The idea behind the story is that something is going on with my mic. Weird. You know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna flip my mic real quick. Let's just do this.
Feedback from the mic.
All right. Can you hear me?
I can. It's echoing, but I can. And it's a little fuzzy, but I can't hear you.
Oh, weird. I don't know what's going on. Anyway, the story is that he eventually finds his way into partnership with Thomas Edison. And it's all because of that burning desire. And like you said, you know, a closed mouth never gets fed is really the way that I kind of looked at it. And a good friend of mine, one of my mentors, taught me that many years ago. And the biggest thing is what my good friend Dr. Greg Reed shared on this show is one of his most famous quotes, which is seek counsel and ignore opinion. So when people often... So it's seek counsel and ignore opinion. Ignore opinions, other people's opinions. Yeah, because what happens is, especially like with writing a book, is the perfect example. If you go to your parents, your friends, whoever, they might talk you out of it and tell you you can't do that. You got to be a writer. You got to be this. You got to be that. But you went to people who were already in the publishing space, people who are already editors, and you just followed that down and made it work. So I absolutely love that story. That is super. It's so inspiring. It's inspiring to the person who is in that space where they don't know what to do. And that's what I love about this story, is that you didn't know what to do either, but you figured out a way and you made it happen, which really at the end of the day is all we can ask for. So Brittany, let's start to wrap up here. So how can people get in contact with you? How can they reach you if they want to hang out with you? You can't hear me anymore? Yeah, I don't know what is happening. Let me mess around with some mics here for a second. Hold on.
I'm just thinking from my musician brain here with sound issues. Can you unplug and replug and maybe turn off the sound and turn it back on and see if that gets rid of the echo? Sometimes it's simple fixes.
You know, that might not be a bad idea. Is that better?
I'm still doing it a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's a little better. It just really doesn't like me now for some reason. Anyway, how can people get in contact with you? How can they get in touch with you and find out more about you?
I can't hear you. I'm
Hold
sorry.
on. You're good.
You should. You know how those videos have been made popular where you just hold up the notes and you pull them up together?
Yeah, you're like, huh, technical difficulties going on here. This is so weird. I've literally never had this before. This is interesting. It's all of the different speakers, too. Like, this one's not working. Maybe it's the microphone. Is that what's going on? That one? I don't know. That sounds okay. The microphone really doesn't work.
You have a built-in mic on the computer. Could you use that?
Is that better? No? I don't know what's going on. Let's do this. I'll just write it in the comments, and then we'll see.
Might be actually the port that very nice. If you can use the built-in mic, it might work without a problem.
Maybe.
Like, how can people get in touch with me? Perfect. We'll do the chat. People can get me through my website, BrittanyBexton.com. That is probably the best way because all of the different platforms that you can reach me on are on my website. I'm on Instagram. I'm really easy to find because I'm just Brittany Bexton, and my name's spelled BrittanyBexton, and that is X as in X-ray. So BrittanyBexton.com, Instagram's at Brittany Bexton, Facebook is Facebook.com/BrittanyBexton. Twitter is at Brittany Bexton or Twitter.com/Brittany Bexton. So I know that all of the platforms are shifting a little bit right now. Who knows where that'll be, but I can promise you it'll be under my name every time. I am one of the lucky people that has a name that most people do not have. So everything gets to be under my name directly. But yeah, you can find my music on my website. You can search me on iTunes, Spotify, all those things to hear the music. My new album actually kind of connects with the book. My book is available on all the platforms you can think of to get it. It's at bookstores. I encourage you highly to go to your local bookstore and support them, especially after everything that's gone on. But you can also order it online. Yeah. And I love visiting with people. I love it when people share with me about their experiences with my book or music or ask me questions. So please feel free to contact me via Facebook or Instagram or any of those places.
This has been amazing, Brittany. I'm going to keep it short because my speakers don't like me today. This is awesome stuff. Thanks so much for being here, and we will see you all again very, very soon. Have a good one, guys.
Thank you. You have a good one, too. Thank you so much for having me. It was so great talking to you, even before the snowstorm of the mic.
It's always something. It's always something. Thanks so much for being here. Have a good one, guys.